He had spent years building a name for himself. To the world, Richard was the image of success, a man who had climbed from nothing to everything, a self-made millionaire, respected, admired, envied. Yet behind that grand picture of prosperity stood a truth few ever saw. A man who had traded time, moments, and memories for a dream he could barely recognize anymore. For the last 3 months, Richard had been overseas, securing a new deal that promised to make his company's future brighter than ever. Long days bled into longer nights as he chased numbers, deadlines, and approvals. His life was a blur, of airports and hotel rooms, of calls and meetings, of applause and emptiness. But as the final signature hit the contract papers that morning, his mind wandered home, to the house that felt too big for the 2 people living inside it, his wife, Emma, and their 6-year-old daughter, Lily. He had promised to return months ago, yet every time, work pulled him back. Emma's voice over the phone always sounded patient, but he could hear the fatigue beneath her calmness. And Lily, sweet, innocent Lily, her voice was growing quieter each time they spoke. That night, Richard boarded a flight home, his heart restless but eager. He had missed them terribly. He imagined the reunion, the laughter, the hugs, the smell of home-cooked food. He would finally make it up to them. When his car pulled into the driveway the next evening, he was struck by silence. The lights inside were dim. Usually Lily would run out to greet him, her tiny feet echoing across the hallway. But this time no one came. He opened the door and stepped inside, calling softly. The house felt colder than he remembered. A faint smell of dust lingered, and a few toys were scattered on the floor, untouched for days. His heart began to sink. He climbed the stairs, hoping they were asleep. But as he reached Lily's room, the sight before him froze him in place. Lily was sitting alone on the floor, a small blanket wrapped around her shoulders. Her hair was tangled, her cheeks pale. The room, once vibrant with drawings and stuffed animals, looked dull, as if life had been drained from it. She didn't even notice him at first. She was holding something, a photo of the 3 of them, tracing the edges with her tiny fingers. Richard stood still, his throat tightening. 3 months. 3 long months, enough time for distance to grow like a wall between them. When she finally looked up, her eyes were tired, as if carrying a sadness too heavy for her age. He could see the questions written in them. Why weren't you here, Daddy? Why didn't you come back? He wanted to rush forward, to hold her, to say everything he never said. But his body refused to move. He realized, painfully, that while he had been chasing a future for her, he had missed her present. Downstairs, he found Emma sitting quietly on the couch, exhaustion in every line of her face. She smiled faintly when she saw him, but it wasn't the smile he remembered. It was distant, almost guarded. The air between them was heavy, not with anger, but with silence built over months of waiting. Over the next few days, Richard tried to make things right. He filled the house with gifts, toys, and laughter he hoped would bring life back into it. But Lily stayed quiet. She would smile politely, play with what he brought, then retreat back to her small world. One evening, as he passed her room, he saw her sitting by the window, staring outside. The sunset light fell softly on her face. In her hand was a drawing, a picture of their family with him missing. That small detail pierced him deeper than any word could. That night, Richard couldn't sleep. He sat alone in the living room, looking at the framed photos of better times. Birthdays, trips, laughter. Each one told a story he wasn't a part of anymore. He realized that in his pursuit of success, he had been absent from the very moments that gave life meaning. The next morning, he decided to take a break. A real one. He canceled meetings, postponed deals, and turned off his phone. For the first time in years, he made breakfast himself, waiting for his daughter to come down. She looked surprised to see him in the kitchen. He smiled nervously and offered her pancakes. She hesitated, then sat beside him. Day by day, he began to rebuild what he had lost. They walked in the park, baked cookies together, watched movies until late. Slowly, Lily started talking more about her drawings, her school, her little dreams. Each word felt like a gift. But even as things began to heal, Richard could sense how fragile it all was. The damage of absence couldn't be erased overnight. He noticed how Lily flinched whenever he mentioned another business trip, how Emma's smile faded each time his phone rang. They had learned to live without him, and now he was learning how painful that truth could be. One weekend, he decided to do something special. He took them to the countryside where he had grown up. Away from noise, phones, and meetings, they spent time under open skies. Lily chased butterflies while Emma sat under a tree, watching them with quiet joy. It was there in that simplicity that Richard realized what real wealth meant. It wasn't the cars, the mansion, or the contracts. It was moments like these, the laughter of his daughter, the warmth of his wife's hand, the peace that came from simply being present. That evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Lily ran toward him holding a small flower she had picked. She handed it to him shyly, saying nothing. But her eyes said everything. For the first time in months, he saw love in them again. Trust, slowly returning. He held her close, tears silently streaming down his face. The wind carried the scent of earth and memory, and in that moment, he made a promise, not with words, but with the quiet conviction of a man who had finally understood what mattered. When they returned home, Richard began to change everything. He restructured his company, giving more responsibility to others. He created strict boundaries, no calls after dinner, no missed family weekends. He started volunteering at Lily's school, attending every event he had once brushed aside. The more time he spent at home, the more he saw the world differently. He noticed how Lily's laughter returned, light and unguarded. How Emma's eyes softened again when she looked at him. How their house slowly turned from a mansion into a home once more. Months later, on a quiet Sunday morning, Richard found Lily sitting on the porch painting. He watched her for a while, her small hands steady, her face peaceful. When she was done, she showed him the picture. It was of their family again. This time, all three of them together holding hands beneath a bright sun. He felt his eyes sting, but this time they weren't tears of regret. They were tears of gratitude. He realized he had been given a second chance, something money could never buy. That night, he stood by Lily's bed, watching her sleep. Her breathing was soft, her face calm. He remembered the day he had returned home, how she had looked so distant, so fragile. Now, she was surrounded by warmth again. He whispered a silent thank you. To life, to love, to the lesson he had learned too late, but not lost entirely. As the house rested in silence, he sat by the window looking out at the stars. Somewhere deep within him, the man who had once been driven by ambition had found peace in something far simpler. The beauty of being a father, the grace of being present. He knew he would never be perfect. He would still make mistakes, still stumble, still struggle to balance the demands of his world. But he also knew that every choice from now on would be guided by one truth: love first, always, because no success, no wealth, no achievement could ever fill the emptiness of losing what truly matters. Success means nothing if it costs you the people you love. True wealth isn't measured by money but by moments. The laughter of a child, the warmth of family, the peace of knowing you were there when it mattered most.